Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to our lecture on Afghanistan. My name is Julia Killet. I'm the director of the Rosa-Luxemburg Foundation Bavaria, and I will be the moderator today. Today, we want to look at the current situation of the population in Afghanistan after the withdrawal of the troops. Before we start, I would like to point out that the event language is English. There is a translation into German. For this, please set German at the small globe at the bottom of the bar. I would like to thank our translator Barbara Bach. Bevor wir starten, möchte ich kurz darauf hinweisen, dass die Veranstaltungssprache Englisch ist. Es gibt eine Übersetzung ins Deutsche. Bitte stellt dazu bei der kleinen Weltkugel unten in der Leiste Deutsch ein. Ich möchte mich sehr bei unserer Dolmetscherin Barbara Bach bedanken. And one more technical note, we are recording the event, only the speakers will be filmed. Our event today is part of our series After the Fall of Afghanistan, which we are organizing in cooperation with the Bavarian Refugees Council and the Kurt-Eisner Association, Pro Asyl, Bellevue di Monaco, Campus di Monaco, and the Rosa-Luxemburg Foundation New York office. Our cooperation partners have been dealing with Afghanistan for a long time and have organized numerous demonstrations against deportations to Afghanistan, keeping contact with Afghans in Germany, giving advice and trying to have a political impact. Today, I'm very proud to welcome Naheed Esar as a speaker. She is 33 years old and worked as a deputy foreign minister of the Afghan government from 2014 to 2020. Prior to that, she worked as a political activist and analyst. She's currently studying cultural anthropology and in the US. It's a great pleasure for me. Good evening or good afternoon in the US, Naheed Esar.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is all mine. Hi to you and to all the participants.
Thank you. I will now interview Naheed Esar for about an hour. Afterwards, our audience will have the opportunity to ask questions. Please post your questions in the chat. I will read out the questions later. Dear Naheed Esar, in Germany, we have been following the dramatic events in Afghanistan. How are you at the moment?
I'm still hopeful, honestly speaking. The country has been through ups and downs, at least in the past 40 years. With the ups and downs, there is equal resistance from the public. As you can see, especially women of Afghanistan, they have showed tremendous amount of courage. They have protested for their very basic rights. They have been beaten up, but they didn't give up. So yes, the country went through a chaotic situation. That is heart-wrenching. That is shocking. Honestly speaking, I am still in denial. I cannot believe what happened in a very short period of time. But what actually gives me hope is the young generation and women in particular.
Thank you. Many people in Afghanistan are on the run. How did you manage to escape Afghanistan?
Back in 2012 and 14, I was a Fulbright scholar. So I came to University of Arkansas as a master's student. In Afghanistan, being part of government, I could sense to some extent the country will go through a chaotic situation. I did warn the officials. I did discuss it with others as well, but I saw my presence there as useless at that time being. So I asked university, and they were gracious enough to accept to offer me a PhD graduate assistantship. So I came. I believe I left the country a week before all the collapse. I came to the University of Arkansas, and I started studying as well as teaching at the university.
How I said, from 2014 to 2020, you were the deputy foreign minister of Afghan government. How did you get in this position, and what was your experience?
Well, actually, I started working from a very young age. I was a university student. I went actually to university at quite a young age. I was only 19 when I graduated from university, bachelor's. So while in university, I started working in my village. My very first research was, interestingly, a subject. It covered women's feelings towards sexuality, which is a taboo issue in Afghanistan. I got a lot of discouragements for that topic, but I wanted to see what Afghan women think about sexuality, and so I went ahead with the idea. And then from there onwards, at a very young age, I started working as a research assistant, as a researcher, as an analyst, and then I came to. Even at a point, I was working in a theater organization, and then I came to Arkansas for my master's, and then I went back home. I initially started as UNDP advisor to His Excellency the President, the former President, at Office of the President, and then from there onwards, I went to Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a deputy foreign minister. But the belief to serve the country and the people goes back to my parents, and to basically my grandparents. Dr. Julia, my grandmother, if I would have one icon in my life, that would be my grandmother. She sacrificed her whole life for the people. Her 6 sons, the oldest 28 years old and the youngest 14 years old, were brutally martyred for fighting for the country. And yet every single traumatic event in her life not only made her hopeless, but gave her more hope. And so seeing the shine in her eyes, despite going through all the troubles, what kept me going on.
Thank you very much for the sad but also hopeful impressions. And I read that your mother organized an underground school for girls and women during the first Taliban rule. Do you think there's a need for underground schools again now?
I really, really, really hope not. There's a saying, if you educate a man, you educate a man. If you educate a woman, you educate the whole society. Girls' education is the core. Education overall, but particularly girls' education, is the core of progress in a society. Being an underground student myself, I was my mother's student. I've been homeschooled, unfortunately, because of the situation in the country. I've been homeschooled. I know the feeling. As a 10-year-old kid, all I could care about was Taliban coming to our house and basically finding out and imprisoning us all. I really, really hope this doesn't come back to upon children in particular, and women. So having said that, one area where I would never give up awareness would be girls' education.
Thank you. My next question is, did the Taliban's rapid advance in July 2021 surprise you, or was it a logical consequence?
It didn't. It did not surprise me, honestly. Taliban were never out of context. Taliban were never out of Afghanistan's politics. Yes, they were not in decision-making and overall authoritative decision-making structures, but they were rooted within the society. They had their ground backup. Kabul collapse within a few hours was surprising. It was shocking. I couldn't sleep for 2 or 3 days and nights, and I just kept, different scenarios kept coming to my mind. What if this? What if that? There are, unfortunately, more so than anything, the level of trust between the authorities, the government in general, and the public was what was most disheartening to me. It takes decades to build that trust between the masses and the authorities, and that was vanished within a few hours.
And why do you think couldn't the Kabul government and security forces stop it? Why they couldn't stop it?
My father being a military person, one thing I know about military is they obey the orders. Therefore, I would not really put the blame on our soldiers. In the past 20 years, they have fought tirelessly for the people. Kabul could have been saved. The government could have kept it safe for a while. I definitely think they could. The soldiers, they obeyed the orders.
And what does it mean for the people to live under the Taliban regime again?
It is, what matters at the end of the day is how quickly, especially in the past 50 years, how quickly we have changed government structures. In 50 years, we had, in 60 years, we had kingdom, we had democracy, we had a socialist communist regime, we had a Mujahid regime, we had a Talib fundamentalist Wahhabi regime, we had a democratic regime, and then we have a Talib regime again. So for the public, the vast majority of young generation who left the country under those traumatic circumstances was not because they were afraid they might killed, but it was because they were afraid of their future. When there is no sustainability in a government structure, there is an increased amount of distrust between the structures and the population and the public. And that's what I saw coming back after 20 years. We have been through the same situation. I remember we went through this very same scenario. We rushed to Pakistan, and then I see that coming back in 20 years. And it's honestly speaking, Dr. Julia, leaving your country, going to another place as a refugee, it's not really only a refugee status. You have to learn a whole different language. You're like a tree who's out of their roots. So it's a very, very difficult life to begin as a refugee, and no one will do it willingly. The young generation left the country desperately because they saw another change of regime, another collapse and another regime structure. And it tremendously increased the distrust, but also their worrisome of the future. They don't know what will happen. I talk to my friends on daily basis in Afghanistan. They are afraid of a possibility of civil war. They are afraid of their children not being able to go to school. They are afraid of economic collapse. They are afraid of basically getting stuck in Afghanistan. The very basic rights are not implemented right now. Winter is around the corner. Yesterday, I was talking to one of my friends, and to one of the widows I've been in touch with. Her children don't have clothes for winter. Her children don't have wood for winter. So it's not really only about political stability. It's about economy. Every time I talk about the widows I've been in touch with, it does make me emotional. So forgive me, but that's how it has been. To me, that's worrying. To me, the young generation leaving desperately the country, that brain drain is worrying. We might have everything could be built, but the human capital cannot be. To me, the children at an age where they have to worry about toys and about luxury foods, their worry is about going to school, whether being able to go to school or not. Their worry is about having wood in winter, having basic clothes in winter to survive. Their worry is the thin line between dead and being alive.
So there's no power to fight for their free choice of life, because they have to look how they can live now, how they can live now.
It really depends on the context and how you define the basic rights and the basic choices. I remember talking to an Afghan girl, and all she was asking was being able, as a basic right, being able to put a scarf on. In the US, that is not considered a basic right. So yes, in Afghanistan, right now, for an 8-year-old child, what matters is if she or he has food, wood for winter, if she is able to go to school. It's more than 40 days now, the beginning of school system classes in Afghanistan, and women have not been allowed to go to schools so far. In some provinces, yes, but in vast majority of the territory, they are still not allowed to go to school. So that's the basic right they're asking for.
And what exactly needs to be done that women and girls can continue to participate in society?
Had it been 20 years ago, or had it even been 10 years ago, my answer would have been different. But today, compared to 20 years ago, we had 0% girls students. Today, we have more than 33% of the overall female students in school systems. Today, girls, even in villages, even in remote areas, all they care about is education. Therefore, all the efforts should be paved that way, from international community, from our friends everywhere in the world. I'm asking them to raise their voice for girls' education. Afghanistan is the only country where women are not allowed to go to school.
Thank you. My next question is, we used an image by Afghan graffiti artist Shamisa Hassani for this event. What is the current situation for art and culture in Afghanistan? What will be the way forward?
Having a cultural anthropology background, one thing I can so proudly claim is Afghanistan is very enriched culturally. With the history of about 55,000 years, the country is diverse, taking the geographic location into consideration. we can see Persian culture in Afghanistan, we can see South Asian culture in Afghanistan, we can see Western culture. It's a diverse of different cultures, and yet it has maintained its own taste. My worry, however, is the vanishing of that enriched culture. I really do hope we were able to keep the diversity. By culture, I don't only mean arts, painting, or theater. By culture, I mean diversity in clothes. In Kabul, I would walk in streets and I would see Indian women wearing typical Punjabi clothes. I would see Indian men wear, not Indian, sorry, but Sikh men wearing typical Sikh turban. Now we don't have it. The vast majority of minorities have left the country. We see a typical attire, and that is a vanishing of root cultures. We see musicians leaving the country. We see poets getting executed or leaving the country or hidden. We see not only cultural events are encouraged, but they're threatened. Yes, the country has been able to keep its culture, despite all the chaos it has been through for years and decades. But I really hope it is able to keep its diversity.
Thank you very much. In Germany, we are very concerned about the local forces. They have worked for the Western military or NGOs. Many were not helped. They were abandoned by the West. What does it mean for the local forces or the local staff? Will they ever work with Western organizations again?
Working again, I wouldn't doubt it, because when you don't have food, you will work for money anyway. But there is also military in particular, and intelligence are in great danger. They have been targeted, they have been humiliated, they have been executed, they have been disappeared. I do hear every now and then I do hear many cases, and I do confirm it with reliable sources. Are they in great danger? Yes, they are. Will they work back for the Western organizations or countries? My honest, brutal answer will be I wouldn't doubt it. Having working with widows for quite a long time, I would, however, say when a military person is killed, it's not one military person, it's the family. It's the wife, it's the kids who are left at the worst circumstances. We have a saying that a woman without a man in the context of Afghanistan is a pot without a lid. So I am worried about their children. I am worried about their women.
Yes, we are all worried about them and all the people there. It's really, really sad. Finally, my last question, and then we came to the questions from the audience. Finally, I would like to ask what we can do concretely, or what is your wish from us, political people here in Germany, what can we do?
I've been saying this for 20 years now, and my answer never changes. I'm asking international community to not give us fish, but teach us fishing, help teach us fishing. I'm humbly asking all the international community to raise their voice for girls' education. If a person is educated, they know they can find their way financially. But if they are not, they will be dependent throughout their lives. I'm also asking them not to abandon Afghan women. Yes, they might not agree with certain Taliban ideas, but who is affected by sanctions? It's the public. The authorities, they will have their financial support here and there, but it's the public who will be affected from the sanctions and from the chaos in the country. The country, especially given that the winter arrived there quite early, is going through, will have a tough winter. So I'm asking international community for immediate humanitarian aid for especially the vulnerables in Afghanistan.
So the first question from Sabrina Kleda: would the Taliban accept humanitarian aid and let foreign agencies into the country?
They have not reacted to it so far. They have in fact asked for international acceptance and international recognition. There are certain organizations, UNAMA for instance, and certain other organizations who are still working in the ground. So I wouldn't see that coming.
And the next question, the sister of an Hazara friend who is an English teacher gets death threats from -IS. What could we do? Get her out to somewhere? Do you have an answer to that question?
I wish I had an answer. Unfortunately, the 35 million population of Afghanistan is in danger. There were several assassination attempts on me when I was in Afghanistan, being a public face. I have been through several attacks and assassination attempts, and I wish I could. There was a way to save the people, but unfortunately, that's how it is.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is from T. Before the collapse, no one wanted to admit that the Taliban had support in parts of the population. They were officially described as a foreign, Pakistan-run terrorist organization. Was this a correct description? How large was and is the real support of the Taliban in the population, and what was the reason for this support?
Afghanistan, unfortunately, is a rather rumor-based society than a fact, research-based society. So there's not a particular research done on Taliban's public support. But yes, there were evidence of foreign involvement within the Taliban structure. Do they not have public support? Did they not have public support in the past? That would be a lie if I say. Maybe not in Kabul, maybe not in Kabul city, but they did have their roots all over Afghanistan. And even in Kabul, had they not have the roots, they wouldn't have been able to basically get the country with so rapidly, basically.
Thank you. The next question from Sabrina Kleda. Do you think the public's pressure as well as pressure from the international community will be enough for the Taliban to rethink their stance on girls and women's education?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a saying that public voice is God's voice. Public power is God's power. The public have all the power. For instance, one of the provinces, they were asked to ban girls' schools, and the public didn't let it. And that province, girls' schools is open right now. So yes, Taliban, if they don't have public support, and if they don't have international support, they wouldn't be able to last. They don't want to govern the country for 6 years now. They want to govern it much longer than that. For that, they do need international recognition. They do need international community support. They do need Afghan support. If these two forces go together hand in hand, they can easily force Taliban to allow girls to schools and to universities.
Thank you. The next question from Patricia. How big is the danger for the families of those people who live in Germany?
Unfortunately, the danger is there are certain categories that are vulnerable. Those who have been public officials, former public officials, those who have been in military, their life is targeted. Those who have either spoken out loud or who have been against certain theologies and certain ideas, contemporary ideas, they are targeted. Other than that, the public Afghanistan unfortunately, Afghanistan has been through ups and downs. Afghanistan has been in war zone for the past 40 years. And so every Afghan's life, unfortunately, is in danger.
Thank you. The next question from Thomas. So we have more questions. Naheed, is this okay for you? We have 8 more questions. It's okay for you? Okay. And Barbara, you're also fine? Thank you. Nice. Yeah, the next question is from Thomas. He asked, why is there such a mixed picture about what the Taliban allow or not? For example, girls' schools open in some places, closed in others, for example. What is the decision-making process in the Taliban government?
From what I'm hearing, they are not certain of the decision-making process so far. Even to them, it was shocking to the collapse was shocking. Even to them, it was a bit too early. They had given it about 2 months. And once the president left the country and once the military surrounded, basically they came as shocked. And so therefore, there's not a structured decision making so far from what I'm hearing. For instance, in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the deputy minister is not there yet. The systems are not working. We now have a head of passport, but passports are dependent on the national IDs. But then for national IDs, we don't have the system yet. I unfortunately heard that during this whole chaos, national ID biometric machines were even stolen. So when you don't have a machine, you're not able to proceed with the national ID, and therefore those who do not have national IDs, they cannot proceed with a passport system. There's not a system set yet. There's not a decision-making process set yet. It is too early for them to be in power. The reason in certain places girls' schools are open and in certain places they are not. One of the provinces I was able to talk to the director of education, and from what I've heard from him was him and the public, they didn't let that happen. They were able to convince the leaders to allow girls' education there. And so in certain provinces, it might take a while, but also there is a huge gap between the newer generation Taliban and the older generation Taliban. The older generation Taliban are well experienced. They have seen politics. They have experienced the good and bad days both, and so they have a balanced understanding as well as balanced, basically, structure for Afghanistan. Whereas the newer generation is out of madrasas immediately. They're at the core of their ideological thoughts, and so for especially in certain provinces, allowing girls' education could be okay for the older generation, but not for the younger generation. So the convincing could take time, from what I'm hearing from my sources in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Naheed. She want to know, does Naheed know the Heiress Families Organization Kinderhilfe Afghanistan? Children Help Afghanistan. Kinderhilfe Afghanistan is a private initiative of the Regensburg family, Dr. Med Reinhardt und Annette Ehrers, and their 5 adult children, Veit, Urs, 12, and the twin sisters Cosima and Veda. Do you know the organization?
I unfortunately don't, but I would love to know more, but I don't.
Yeah, if you want, you find a link in the chat. And I also can send it after to you. And the next question is, how was the recognition of the military intervention in the population over the past 20 years?
Foreign military intervention. Based on my experience, but there was a different opinion towards foreign military intervention between the rural and urban areas. There was a conflicting ideas. To some it was a saving support system, because unfortunately before the intervention 2001, women were not allowed to go to schools. Women were not allowed to go to universities. Women were not allowed to go to a male doctor without a male mahram, male support. With the intervention, basic rights were provided to the public, women in particular. Within the military intervention, finances boosted, the country economically could do much better. And so the vast majority, they were satisfied, because they were, to some extent, they were able to have the basic rights. But to a group, it was also an intervention, a foreign intervention. And so no matter what, a foreign intervention is a foreign intervention. And especially in the context of Afghanistan, there is a reason they say it's a graveyard of the empires, because people have fought the intervention for centuries now.
Thank you very much. How can we get reliable informations about the situation of Afghanistan? Do you know we can get them, or where can we get them? I think.
Reliable information, I would unfortunately say you can, at this stage, you cannot get really reliable information on the country, because we have had in the past, we have had a few organizations, analyst organizations and research organizations with reliable sources. Being an employee of Afghanistan Analyst Network, AAN, I can say that was one of the organizations with reliable analysis and reliable information. A few other organizations, I could name them. Media to some extent, because according to our constitution, every single entity journalists and media had access to every single entity's information. Afghanistan was one of the most media-friendly countries in the region before August 2021. Now, I do hear a limitation on access to information for journalists. For instance, a few days ago, two or 3 days ago, 2 journalists were beaten up by the authorities in Torkham for trying to get some information. So during this transition, I would unfortunately say I don't see any source providing reliable information. For instance, there was a story that was covered by all national media outlets, even by an international media outlet a few days ago. And so the story was so disheartening that I had to dig deeper in it, and I had to find sources. I had to find the victims' families. And then what I find out is it was not what it was portrayed in the media outlets, both in Afghanistan and in international medias. And so therefore, I wouldn't recommend any organization or any media at this stage, at this transition stage, to for a absolute, reliable, accurate information.
Thank you. The next question is, do you think there is a dialogue process possible with the Taliban regime? What might be important in this process?
The dialogue process is absolutely possible. What is most important in that process is inclusivity. The dialogue has to be inclusive. Afghanistan, fortunately, has diverse ethnicities. We have Pashtuns, we have Tajiks, we have Hazaras, we have Uzbeks, we have Pashais, we have Qizilbashis, and so to include, they all have to be included, all the ethnicities. But most importantly, the 50% of population that are women have to be included in this dialogue process. Young generation, above 65% of the population is young in Afghanistan. They definitely have to be included in the dialogue process. It is not only possible, but if we do not have a dialogue process, if we do not have an inclusive dialogue process, there are possibilities of a further war and civil war, and basically further distrust between the authorities and the public masses.
The next question is, do you see a scenario where the Taliban rules the country and Afghanistan prospers?
Do I see a scenario where the Taliban rule the country? I mean, they are already ruling the country. Do I see a scenario of a long-term ruling by the Taliban? I do, if inclusivity is taken into consideration. If every single citizen of Afghanistan do see themselves part of the country, part of decision-making of the country. But if there is only one tribe involved, if there is only one sex involved, I do not see a long-term sustainable governance ruling Afghanistan.
And the next question is, can I please ask to which story Naheed was referring to? The story she checked and was wrong? Was it the story about beheading of a sportswoman, or beheading of a sportswoman?
Yes.
Yes. And the last question, do you know organizations which are able to work in Afghanistan at the moment?
Yes, I am aware of certain organizations that are still working in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Okay, then thank you very much to the audience for your good and long participation. Unfortunately, we have already reached the end of our event. I would like to thank Naheed Esar once again for her presentation. I would also like to thank Barbara Bach for her professional translation. And I want to thank my colleague Samira Butt for helping me with the questions. As previously announced, today was the second event in our series after the fall of Afghanistan. We will continue in November. Then we will look at 3 more topics. First, local forces. Second, evacuation. And third, Ansar Center, Afghans arrive in Germany. For more information, see the Bellevue de Monaco website under events. I will post the link in the chat. I wish us all a good evening. Thank you for your interest. Stay healthy and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.